Fantastic, Jake. It's wonderful to be here on this sunny Wednesday.
Oh, it's sunny up there in Frederick. I'm down here in DC, and we have our first snow shower of the year going on, which I know that makes you very displeased, John.
Well, it was funny. Earlier, Kyle was in the office, and there was a little bit of a snow flurry out the window, and I said, "It's snowing," and simultaneously we said, or he said, "Oh, cool," and I said, "Oh no."
Yeah, for
So
those of you tuning in, I see we have some folks already signing on. Just know that John is a major winter hater. He hates all things cold. Which I think is very funny for a man from suburban Chicago.
yeah, well, as I like to say, the cold just broke me down.
Yep.
So
Well,
I
welcome
can't take it
everybody.
anymore.
We are going to be doing a live stream today, talking about some of the artifacts in the collection of the National Museum of Civil War Medicine, and some of which, one of which is actually on loan to the museum and features prominently. Many of you who have been to the museum, chances are you've seen this particular item that I'll be talking about. We're going to spend the next hour or so having a conversation about some of these artifacts, some of the stories that they tell, and some of the connections to Civil War history that can be found at the museum. We've been doing these videos going back to March and have a plan to continue doing them well into 2021. It's been so amazing to get to interact with all of you on an almost everyday basis, it feels, multiple times a week doing these video programs. And we appreciate all of your support. If you do enjoy this video today, please go ahead and click that like button, share button. That allows more people to join in the conversation. We really appreciate all of that you have done, all of our followers here on Facebook, over on YouTube, all that you have done to help spread the word about the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. I have been very excited to see the last 4 or 5 months or so have been crazy growth for the museum's social media accounts, more people learning about us every day. And that is in big part because of all of you and the fact that you have become advocates for our institution. And many of you have become members and donors of the museum. And we really, really appreciate that, all of your support financially as well. We are in the midst of a fundraising drive for the museum. I'm going to be dropping a link to our fundraiser, our Support Hope Through History campaign. We've raised about $7,700 already in just a few weeks. Thank you to those of you who have already donated. If you haven't yet, please consider becoming a donor to this campaign. We're ultimately looking to raise about $25,000 for the museum. It's been a rough year for all of the museum industry, and we've been doing these virtual programs, which have been a great boon to us and getting support for us. And you can help to continue the work that we do at the museum by donating to the Support Hope Through History campaign, which you will see in the comments section right now. You will find a link to that. Any dollar amount will help, no matter what. If you have $1 or 50 cents or $50, every little bit helps us to get to our goals. So we really appreciate all of your support out there, and thank you so much for all that you do to allow us to do what we do. And what we love to do is talk about Civil War medical history. So all of that being said, we have folks signing on. I'll just get some shout outs here in the comment section. Got folks from Colorado, Telford, PA, Northeastern North Carolina, Jersey City. We've got Charlottesville, Virginia, Chicago, Mechanicsburg, PA, Windsor, Ontario, sunny Albany, New York, Sarasota, Florida, Concord, New Hampshire, who is also having snow flurries today. Thank you all so much for tuning in with us. Again, give us a like and a share if you are enjoying the video. Lynn signing in from Catonsville, Maryland as well. Hi, Lynn. Thanks for joining in with us today. All right, so let's jump into our program today. Again, we're going to be talking about some of the artifacts that are on display and in the collection at the museum in Frederick. And we're going to start off with John is going to kick off our program today.
Yeah, so we're going to bounce back and forth here. We're going to talk about some artifacts that are on display and some of which that aren't. So you'll get a rare kind of behind the scenes look, as it were, into our collection. This first object I want to talk about is one of my very favorite things. I'll never forget where Jake and I were when we discovered just how cool this really was. So we're working every day to better understand and learn about the objects in our collection. And that is a chess set that is on display in the galleries here. And I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, there we are. Here's a look at this chess set. It's on display in our Camp Life gallery. The pieces here are made out of a material called gutta percha, which was quite common in the 19th century. It's kind of latexy rubber-like substance that's contained. It comes from the sap of a tree of the same name, gutta percha. Hopefully, I'm correct about that. But it's plant-based substance that was common, used for kind of decorative household pieces like chess sets or like silverware handles, fork and knife handles, that sort of thing, was pretty common. With this chess set, like I said, it's in our Camp Life gallery. Soldiers would play games in between battles. As the saying goes, war is organized bore, which is just a great turn of phrase. But it was incredibly true, because if you think about it, of course, when you think about the Civil War, you probably tend to think about the large battles and things. But in reality, armies were only fighting on average of a battle, maybe two every month. There were exceptions to this, siege operations or intensive campaigns like the Overland Campaign during the kind of spring of 1864, where the armies are marching and fighting nearly constantly. So there are exceptions to this. But for the most part, most Civil War armies go long periods of time without fighting, and they're sitting in camp, and there's only so much drill you can do. And especially once the sun goes down, you can't have too many organized activities. And as we know from it being winter right now, at least in the United States, the sun sets fairly early. So you have a lot of time where not a lot of interesting things are happening. So games like chess, very popular in Civil War camps. Now, this chess set belonged to none other than Surgeon William Child of the 5th New Hampshire. If you tuned into my live stream with Peter Carmichael, or you watched that video, that was couple weeks ago, 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, we talked about one of his letters. He has there's a published letter collection that contains his Civil War letters, creatively titled Letters from a Civil War Surgeon. And there's all kinds of really incredible stuff in that book about the history of Civil War medicine. It's a wonderful resource. But when we discovered that this chess set belonged to William Child, someone that Jake and I reference quite regularly, that was a really fun connection for us. Like, you spend some time with people from the past and you almost feel like you know them. It's like, oh, no way, this belonged to William Child. And so we went to the book and we said, oh, I wonder if he talks about it. So I wonder if he talks about this chess set in his letters. And lo and behold, he did. He wrote, now this chess set, I should say, was a gift. It was given to him, and this is the board that goes with it, by, as you can see there, Corporal John A. Barker. And it was given to him as a Christmas gift, December 25th of 1863. Now, Corporal Barker was wounded, presumably at the Battle of Antietam. He was discharged from the Army on medical disability October 7th of 1862. So he was most likely wounded at Antietam. It's hard to say, but it's entirely possible, if not probable, that Surgeon Child and John Barker here were fairly close. Maybe they would talk about games regularly, or how they wish they had something to pass the time. But after he was discharged from the Army, apparently Corporal Barker made this chessboard and this chess set and gave it to Surgeon Child as a Christmas gift. And that winter, Surgeon Child writes about this chess set. He says, he writes in November, so before he's received this, clearly chess is already on his mind. He writes, well, we have a long winter in camp before us. Our work will be but slight. We shall have much time for riding, reading, writing, and chess. I mean to read considerable time to medical and scientific reading, but must play chess some. So clearly he's locked in on chess. And eventually when he gets it, clearly he played it quite a bit. He's still writing about it in February of 1865, 2 years later. He wrote, of late, I have got into the habit of not going to bed before 12 or 2 o'clock. I yet engaged in chess and therefore do not count the hours. I have an ambition to be the best chess player in the regiment, and thus far can beat everyone in 2 out of 3 games. So this chess set, you know, it looks very simple to us today, albeit fairly pretty, but it's a critical piece of the Civil War experience. There's so much more to Civil War than battles, than even medical care. There's ways that soldiers passed the time. A lot of it was boring, sitting in camp. And so this kind of, you know, we have someone that talks about this chess set, and it kind of connects it all. You know, this was a gift by someone he cared about. It was, you know, how he spent the time, something that he found to be fun. I mean, you know, it's so easy for the Civil War to be this faceless conflict. And I think this puts, you know, a human face onto things. And that's one of the reasons why I really love this particular artifact. It's such a neat find, and I'm glad we have it in our collection.
Yes,
Um,
John feels very passionately about the chess set. He felt so passionately about it that he wrote a piece for our Surgeon's Call that we put out, a booklet that we put out for our members. Those of you who are members of the museum will be have received these copies of that particular document. And you will find that article now in the comments section. So if you want to read more about the chess set, I feel like William Child feels about chess the way, John, you feel about NBA basketball.
that's not a bad analogy.
All right, so I have another item related to camp life that I will be showing here next. So let me pull up my screen and show an artifact that those of you who have visited the museum in the past will probably be pretty familiar with. So this is a surgeon's tent from the Civil War that is on display currently in our Camp Life gallery at the museum in Frederick. This is an item that is currently on loan to us and has been for many years from the incredible Civil War collection of Dr. Gordon Dahman from Illinois. Dr. Dahman has many items on loan with us and has donated many others, has been just an incredible resource for us at the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. I wanted to give a shout out to the Dahman family for all of their support for the museum over the years. This tent in particular is a fascinating part of the Civil War. The only known Civil War surgeon's tent still in existence that we can tie to a direct person. And this tent belonged to Surgeon John Wiley of the 6th New Jersey Volunteer Infantry. He served with that regiment from 1862 to 1864. So this tent in particular spent quite a bit of time out in the field, in particular in winter encampments, where these tents were more often used than actually while these units are out in campaigning. And the camp life display that we have at the museum is, I think, does a crucially important job of talking about what the Civil War is like, not when these men are on campaign. And as John mentioned, you know, Civil War camps are this is an important integral part of the Civil War story. The Civil War soldier spends far less time on the move and on the battlefield than they spend in these winter encampments, which could be pretty disastrous for the soldiers themselves, because these camps are very unhealthy places. They become major settlements for diseases like typhoid fever, diseases like dysentery, measles, just doing quite a bit of research into measles today. So these camps spread those sorts of illnesses very rapidly, and could be fatal or disabling to the soldiers who are there. And so the surgeon plays a crucial role in those encampments. Sick call in the morning, where these sick soldiers are going to show up and asking for medications. Very little that a surgeon during the Civil War era can do with the knowledge that they have available. We used to have an audio kind of set up in the Camp Life exhibit, which talked about blue mass, the blue pill, mercury being used. So these encampments, as we have on display at the museum, are crucial to understanding the Civil War soldiers' experience. Now, a little bit more about John Wiley, and I think a fascinating little tidbit, which is what we're kind of aiming for with today's program, is to kind of entice you to learn more about what's in the collection at the museum. Is that he was a native of Cape May, New Jersey, a place I'm a big fan of. The hotel building that he lived in during the time of the Civil War is still around, and is still operates as a bed and breakfast. So if you stay at the Doctor's Inn in Cape May, New Jersey, you are walking in the footsteps of Surgeon John Wiley of the 6th New Jersey. So we always love those kind of fascinating connections that we can draw between the past and the present. And so if you come and visit the museum in Frederick, you come to the Camp Life display, which I will admit is my favorite display at the museum. You can come and hang out with Surgeon John Wiley's tent and other items from that surgeon that we have on display there. So I'm going to throw it back over to John for our next artifact that we're going to spotlight today.
And just one other point about the tent that, both about the tent and, it's such a cool piece, but also, about how, his residence still stands and is a bed and breakfast today, that these surgeons and soldiers, they go on and live the remainder of their lives when they go home after the Civil War, the reverberations of the Civil War. And I'm not exactly, making a crazy point here, but the reverberations of the Civil War extend well beyond 1865 in all kinds of big and small ways. So anyway, I love that. So now we'll talk a little bit here about some of the medicine that Civil War surgeons would give out. Now this item is not currently on display. This is a morphine shaker. You can see it's kind of like a salt shaker sort of thing. And the purpose of this was to sprinkle morphine directly onto an open wound. Morphine and opium-based products were exceedingly common on both sides during the Civil War. They were prescribed for all manner of injuries and maladies and whatever you could think of. A Civil War surgeon probably prescribed opium in some capacity. So it's not uncommon that when people come to us, they say, well, they didn't really have any painkillers back then, did they? Well, they did actually. That's one of the ways that Civil War medicine, you're actually doing okay. They can mitigate your pain pretty well. It's the trick is, of course, they struggle to stop the spread of infection. And we're going to get to that in just a second here when it comes to how this was applied. Now, this is obviously a pretty sanitary way to apply morphine. Just kind of shake right onto the wound. If it was administered in a powdered format and they didn't have a shaker, it wouldn't be uncommon for a surgeon to just take their finger and just put it right on the wound to apply it there. Or in some cases, they would even lick the tip of their finger to get the powder to kind of stick to their finger so that they could put it in there. So we're breaking all kinds of rules as we know them today when it comes to germ theory and you name it. So there's that. They also, if you can believe it, they had access to hypodermic needles during the Civil War. Now the ones that were sharp enough to actually pierce the skin and inject something, those were rare enough, but they weren't pervasive, but they did have needles that they would use to inject. But in many cases, the needle wasn't quite sharp enough, so they'd take a knife and they kind of puncture the skin and then stick the needle right in to the new knife wound that they just created. So they're again, as I like to say, Civil War medicine is not modern medicine, but some of the tools they start using kind of sort of begin to resemble tools that are familiar to us today. But like I mentioned, the lack of knowledge of germ theory is the real tragedy when it comes to the science of Civil War medicine. Pain mitigation is something that they are pretty good at. And just to read you a quote talking about how common this was. This is from a report of medical director Henry Hewitt on his order of use of morphine in wounds during the Atlanta campaign. He wrote, "The insertion of morphine into wounds of the chest attended by pain has been of the utmost advantage. I made the insertion of morphine into all painful wounds a standing order of the medical department, and it has acted so admirably as to enlist every surgeon in favor of the practice. Its good effects are especially remarkable in painful wounds of the joints, abdomen, and chest. From 1 to 3 grains are inserted on the point of the finger. I desire especially to call the attention of the profession to this practice, which is simply a generalization of the well-recognized application of morphine hypodermically." So also in there at the tail end, you see that there's kind of some debate about the best mode of operation to administer morphine. And this shaker and needles and by finger or in pill format, they're all viable avenues by which morphine and opium-based medicines could be delivered. And Jake here is going to talk about another way, a liquid way in which opium would be administered.
Yes, so let's talk about laudanum. And
It'll cure what ails you. You're not going to feel much after you drink this.
This is true. Let me get to our next slide there. So this is another one of my favorite artifacts that we have in the collection at the museum. This is a bottle, an empty bottle of laudanum that we have in the museum's collection. Laudanum was a mixture of alcohol and opium that was frequently used during the Civil War era, prescribed by doctors, but also could be purchased over the counter. And you could go and get yourself some laudanum of your own. It's going to be used in an opium, and all varieties can be used in millions of doses during the Civil War. As John mentioned, the use of painkillers becomes very common during the Civil War, and is one of the effective treatments that they do have during the Civil War era. They are able to manage pain. The reason that this particular piece fascinates me, and we have had this on display at various times at the Pry House Field Hospital Museum at Antietam National Battlefield. But I love this particular piece because of its connection to Frederick. So the museum is located in Frederick, Maryland, a historic town just full of Civil War era history. Many of the buildings remain that were used as hospitals in the wake of the Battle of Antietam. About 8,000 patients, between 8 and 10,000 patients are going to be treated or pass through the city of Frederick in the wake of the Battle of Antietam. 27 buildings used at the time as hospitals, as makeshift military hospitals. And we are very fortunate to have a wonderful historic district that was set up in the 1940s that actually preserves a lot of the historic architecture. So if you come for a visit to Frederick and to the museum, you are going to be walking around in a city that is very much, in terms of architecture, the same city that it was during the 1860s. The downtown area still has that very historic feel, the historic charm. You can walk around and see the same buildings that were around at the time of the Civil War, where Dr. Jonathan Letterman walked by, or George McClellan, all of these figures who play a role during the Civil War that passed through Frederick during 1862, 63, and 64, you're going to see very much the same city. You see it at the museum. Our building is built in the 1830s, and you see it with the connection on this bottle. So if you see D.C. Weinbrenner is the owner of a grocery store in Frederick in the Civil War era. And this bottle did originate with that particular store. I always like to kind of point out the the dosages that are pointed out on the bottle. Yeah, giving opium to children as young as 3 months old,
Opium and alcohol.
Opium and alcohol. It's a fun mixture. I do like that dosage on there is kind of an amusing touch. But this bottle has a connection to, again, this Weinbrenner shop, which was just around the corner from where the National Museum of Civil War Medicine is located, just a few blocks away. And a few years ago, I came across, kind of searching around for Frederick Civil War history, I came across this image from the New York Public Library. New York Public Library has a amazing digital collection. Highly recommend going on there and searching. They have all kinds of cool stuff. But this is the building where this bottle of laudanum was purchased. And the building actually still stands today. You can see it between 3rd and 4th Streets in downtown Frederick. So kind of on the northern side on North Market Street, northern side of downtown. You can still see this building today. So again, these connections between the past and the present are very much a part of the Frederick landscape today. We can see it in the connection between this artifact in our collection and the actual landscape of the town that still exists to this day.
Which of the buildings in that photograph was it? Was it the tall one or the one closest to the camera?
Yes, it is the tall one.
Okay, the 3-story one.
Let me pull it back up. Yeah, it's this building right here. You can see up at the top where the actual
Weinbrenner, there it is.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't point that out right away. But yeah, this was the store. And I couldn't get I was hoping to get a Google Maps image of this particular building, but the Google Maps image was taken in the summer, and so there's trees. And so you can't actually see the architecture, but building still stands today.
Oh, very cool. I somehow had never made that connection. And if your curiosity has been piqued by all our discussion about opium, if you go back through our past videos on our Facebook page or YouTube channel, we had a conversation with historian Jonathan Jones. I think he's Dr. Jonathan Jones by now. He's excellent. He's one of the leading experts on opium use during the Civil War era and after the Civil War. He's done some incredible work. So if you want to learn more about that, go check out that video. This next artifact, or go ahead, jump in, Jake, if you're going to say something there.
Nope, it's all you.
Okay, you look like you had a thought. So this next artifact or artifacts that I'm going to bring up are also not on display. I kind of stumbled across these when I was, so the education team has sort of, read-only access to our, the back door of our collections database. So we can't, thankfully, we can't make any real changes to the collection information, but we can kind of flip through, look at pictures and see files on some of the things. And I stumbled across this in our collections. It was a series of cases done up by a board to retired disabled officers. And I said, I wonder what that's about. And so it led me to 11 or 12 of these little kind of booklets. They're not very thick. They're bound. together, and they're, as you can see, not very thin here. And for those of you concerned about me touching this artifact without any gloves, I was assured by our collections manager, and I know there's some different schools of thought on this, but paper gloves are not necessary, and there's some that even suggest that gloves might be damaging. But I have another artifact coming up that I will be wearing gloves for, so get excited about that. Anyway, there are a series of cases by this entity called the Board to Retire Disabled Officers, kind of a very bureaucratic board designed to review cases of officers in the regular Army, not volunteers, in the regular Army who have some sort of health condition that might prohibit them from continuing to serve in the Army, physically preventing them. It's chaired and run by some familiar faces to Civil War heads out there. We have someone by the name of Delos Sackett, who sits on there. I think he goes on to become in charge of the, I'm blanking on the name, the Invalid Corps, the Veteran Reserve Corps. He's associated there. General Erasmus Keyes, formerly the 4th Corps commander of the Union Army of the Potomac, notably during the 7 Days battles. He famously doesn't continue to occupy that role too much longer after that time, and but he's not fired from the military. That's not really how that works. So he ends up, among presumably other things, sitting on this board reviewing medical cases, and the headliner, as it were, is General Irvin McDowell of First Bull Run infamy. After that, I guess it was sort of decided he probably shouldn't have a field command. I mean, he sticks around for a little bit, but eventually by 1863, which is when these cases are from, 1863 and 64, he's relegated to this board, which meets in Wilmington, Delaware. And they, along with a kind of regular rotating group of surgeons who kind of provide the medical examinations, surgeons John Campbell, E.J. Bailey, Charles McCormick, Eben Swift, Charles H. Lamb, and Charles Sutherland. And there's kind of a different collection of people at every hearing. They review these cases. So, and how it works is an officer, in this case, Major Newby of the 3rd United States Cavalry, would be ordered before the board. In the first page here, it's like story time with John here. In the first page, they list basically who all was present. And in case you, I'm sure you believe me, but you'll see in this top bit here, you can see the name McDowell. Hope you can. Make sure that's straight. I hope that's visible there. Anyway, McDowell is involved here along with a number of other people, but it lists, who all is present, the date, and what the kind of gist of the case is. And then eventually they get into more handwritten notes. So this writing is a lot less nice, more scribbled. It's all in pencil here. And basically they kind of interview the person that's before them. So in this case with Newby, they say, how old are you? Describe your military service to this point. Why are you here? What kind of medical issue are you dealing with? And he will, of course, answer these questions. Once the committee is out of questions, then 2 different surgeons will examine the patient, and they'll kind of compare and contrast their notes, and then make a recommendation to the board on what they recommend. Now, there's all kinds of interesting things that come out of these cases, some of which are combat related, some of which are disease related. It really runs a gamut of why some people are there. And in some cases, there's one soldier, I think by the name of Tilford, who one officer who says, to be honest, I'm not even really sure why I'm here. And they say, okay, well, you can go back. You're not, you are still fit for service. But there are a few different outcomes here. It's interesting to note who is approved to continue serving and who isn't. So Mr. Newby, who I've been referencing here, he is basically suffering from consistent and violent nosebleeds, and the board eventually says maybe you shouldn't do active service anymore. But there's another example that they list. Let me see. Let me find the gentleman's name. First Lieutenant Chandler Eakin, or Aiken, Eakin, of the 1st U.S. Artillery. He has an eye infection as well as an open wound on his leg. So Lieutenant Eakin of the 1st U.S. Artillery, he's wounded twice from case shot in his shoulder at the Battle of Williamsburg. And he also broke a few ribs. I mean, he was not in a good way, but he eventually recovers from that and returns to his unit on June 20th, 1863, just in time for Gettysburg, when he gets hit by a shell in the leg. And also around that time contracts an eye infection. So he's seemingly in pretty bad shape. So he's got an active eye infection that both examining surgeons note, like something's up with his eye. And one of the wounds on his leg that he sustained at Gettysburg, and this hearing takes place 3 months after the battle. So presumably it would have had time to heal, but it's just open, and it's like this open wound. And they're like, looks like you're still fit for service. Get back out there. So I think it's fascinating comparing the cases of some of these people. We got Newby, who suffers from recurring violent nosebleeds, say, I maybe shouldn't serve. But yet they have someone with an eye infection and an open wound. They're like, oh yeah, you get back out there. And what's also interesting to note, with very few exceptions, almost everyone says, please let me continue to serve. I think sometimes when we think about examining boards that look at people, whether they're medically fit for service, I think we tend to think people are trying to get out of service. But and it could be because these are regular Army officers. These are people who quite literally signed up for this. That could account for that. These aren't volunteers. But almost without fail, they're like, no, I really want to serve. Some of them say, maybe I shouldn't do active field service, but maybe you can stick me behind a desk somewhere. So I think it kind of challenges our perceptions of, what a medical board like this, what kind of scenes you might see before it. And the other two quick points that I think are kind of fascinating about this are that, number one, these surgeons, they can obviously find things, but this is obviously an age before x-rays and all these really fancy tests, EKGs, echocardiograms, all these really incredible things that we have today. They're basically relying on the patient to give them an accurate representation of what has happened to them. And I'm not saying, they shouldn't trust the patient or anything like that. It's more, what I'm trying to say is, during the Civil War, without these detailed records of patient histories and more advanced tests, you're really heavily reliant on this narrative that you see in all of these cases. There's a detailed narrative where the patient describes what happened to them. And that's so pivotal when it comes to Civil War medicine. That's easy to forget. And then finally, and of course I have abruptly and suddenly forgotten my final point. That Civil War surgeons who are doing this examination, they're making recommendations to people like Irvin McDowell and Erasmus Keyes. They're smart guys, but they don't really know too much about medicine, I don't think. Someone can prove me wrong in the comments about their extensive medical backgrounds, but they don't know too much. They're on there because they're generals and they got to do something. But the surgeons are basically making their recommendations. So the power of the surgeon to determine whether or not someone can be in a combat situation is immensely pivotal, and it creates this kind of interesting power dynamic that I think it would be interesting to look more into. So anyway, that's what I got about that. Really incredible set of things. And I wrote a blog post about them if you're curious about reading a little bit more about that. I'm sure Jake probably already has it in the comments.
I do. It's in fact already over there. It's a really good blog post, definitely worth checking out. So my next artifact is kind of in part, I'm going to talk about an artifact and a manuscript collection that we have at the museum. Before we do that, I do want to uh, throw out there, if you haven't yet liked or shared the video, please consider doing so. That helps more people join in. I have just realized but a few minutes ago that Facebook has given me a new tool, which I'm going to test now. So if you want to get updated when we go live, you can follow the museum. And Facebook on the back end tells me that I can show a button that allows you to be prompted to follow the museum. So I'm going to try that right now. So you may see a button that allows you to follow the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. Clicking that now. If you see it right now, please consider following the museum if you don't already do that. So we always enjoy new nifty things that Facebook allows us to do on these live streams. So if you haven't yet followed the museum, please consider doing so now. So our next collection item I'm going to be talking about is going to be a vaccination tool. So we're going to show, let me pull up my lancet and comb. There we go. So this is one of the items that we have in the collection connected to vaccination, a topic which is in the news very much so right now as we are preparing in the United States for the first COVID vaccines, which should be looking like they're going to be administered possibly as early as next week and are being distributed as we speak. Other countries abroad, including Great Britain, also already have started that process of vaccinating their populations. And this is something that existed during the Civil War specifically for smallpox. This tool would have been used in that process. Back in the Civil War era, they do have vaccination for smallpox. That goes back even to the 18th century. And vaccination is pretty gross, involving the scabs of people who already have a preferably less dangerous strain of pox that would allow a patient to be given, pass on the immunity to the disease. This proved problematic during the Civil War for a variety of reasons. There is a Smithsonian / Atlas Obscura article about how soldiers were unwittingly giving themselves syphilis when they were doing their own vaccinations against smallpox while sitting around in camp. That was a problem. Another problem, as I documented with the case of the 20th Maine Volunteer Infantry just before Chancellorsville, is that the Union Army was vaccinating soldiers, but inadvertently gave a very dangerous strain of smallpox kind of admission to the 20th Maine Regiment. Multiple soldiers fell ill, multiple soldiers died, and the unit was quarantined so much so that they missed the Battle of Chancellorsville entirely as a result of being quarantined from the rest of the army. So vaccinations going on during the Civil War. But we have a document in our collection, a series of documents in our collection that I am very excited to talk about. It's a collection of letters written. Let me stop share. It was a series of letters written by Major George Everett of the 9th New Hampshire Volunteer Infantry. He writes a series of letters all through his war service, which is 1862 to 1863, letters home to his wife Ellen and to his son George. Writing a series of letters. They came to the National Museum of Civil War Medicine in 2015 from Paul Urban, who gave a sizable donation of his artifacts and manuscripts to the museum from Florida. These letters were kind of in a large kind of bundle that I discovered on one of Dr. Urban's shelves, and I opened it up, and it was a letter about the Vicksburg campaign. And I was just fascinated by these letters, and ultimately they became part of the collection that came to the museum. And in transcribing these letters, which were done by an intern a few years back, there are incredible medical stories tied up in this letter collection. He is a major, he is a line officer, he is not medical. Nevertheless, he does document, in some cases, his own sickness, the wounds that he experiences and sees during the war. If you follow us in just a few days, On December 13th, there'll be a post with documentation from Major Everett about the Battle of Fredericksburg. He has a very vivid description of watching a man in a unit ahead of him be struck in the center mass of his body by a solid shot and quartering him, literally tearing the man apart. Those kinds of descriptions come through in this letter collection. But the connection to vaccination is that during the winter of 1863, as the Army of the Potomac is being vaccinated, Major Everett describes his vaccination in January of 1863. And he describes it in a letter home to his wife, Ellen. And he says, quote, "The wind is blowing like mad. We must all suffer terribly, I know. I know for in all probability we shall not have a chance to pitch our tent again for days. And then if we get into battle, the wounded must suffer beyond description. But such is the life of a soldier, and the more cheerfully one endures his lot, the easier he bears his burden. I was inoculated 3 or 4 days ago, for the kind pox, the smallpox, are both in the army, and my arm today is quite sore. I have some fears that I might take cold in it, but hope for the best." So I have a shared experience with Major Everett there of getting a flu vaccine and having that kind of sore arm for a little while. This is something that he documents experiencing. The 9th New Hampshire is actually going to be vaccinated as a unit a little later in May of 1863. They're going to be vaccinated as they and the 9th Corps are going to be moved from the Virginia theater of action down to Kentucky and are going to get involved in the Western theater for 1863. And it's in the Western theater that George Everett is actually going to die of disease, or potentially he may have been poisoned. This is actually a kind of contention in the history of Everett. Unfortunately, still haven't found a photo of him yet. So if you know of a photo of George Everett out there, would love to be able to show that off. But he dies in August of 1863. His unit is suffering massively from disease during the Vicksburg campaign and along the Mississippi River. He falls ill and eventually dies in a hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio. And his African-American orderly is actually accused and ultimately convicted of poisoning Everett. Now, whether or not that actually happened, they didn't have a lot of evidence to convict. So there's a lot of contention. The unit was very sick, and Everett becomes sick as the unit was suffering from all of this disease. So chances are he probably died of disease. But nevertheless, a fascinating collection of letters with connection to vaccination in our collection. These letters are transcribed. You will be seeing more from the Everett collection on our social media pages, as well as, I hope, as I get to start writing some blogs again for John. So you'll see them on our website as well. All right, so John, I'm going to throw it back to you for our last artifact.
Fantastic. Another one not on display. It's always fun to be able to kind of pull back the curtain, as it were, and show some of the things from our vault, from our collections room. I'm gloved up now. We have this item here. So this is, well, it goes by many names, but this is an eating utensil for a Civil War amputee, someone with only one arm. It's a knife fork combo, or as I saw the term thrown about a little bit as I was doing some research, some people call it a knork, which I very much don't enjoy as a term, knork or a knife fork combo. I don't really love either name for this. But you know, if you got one arm, you got your fork action, and then you got your knife. And it's still pretty sharp. Not that we would or you would want to, but you could still pretty easily cut some food with this. And you know, the fork part looks pretty sharp, so you could use this as an eating tool. Don't worry, we won't, but you could if you wanted to. I was doing some research to try and find out, you know, more information about these. Of course, the Civil War produces many amputees. This isn't shocking information. There's about 60,000 amputations performed during the Civil War, ranging from losing a finger to a whole leg or an arm. And so there becomes a huge market, obviously, for prosthetic limbs. And there's kind of this clever market industry that kind of pops up after the war, especially in the late 1860s, early 1870s, to produce these kind of combo utensil type things. And we have a number of these in our collection. I'll show you images of a few others. Some of these are on display. But before the war, there was also kind of a market for these combo utensils. Now this one, I found a lot of references. The origin, it seems, I struggled with finding specific information, but from what I could piece together, the origin of these kind of combo utensils initially has something to do with camping. Which obviously Civil War soldiers are doing a lot of. Ease, convenience, lightweight, so you don't have to carry multiple utensils if indeed you're going to use a utensil to eat your food. You see people filing patents, 1859, 1860, 1861, for these kind of combo fork, knife, spoon things. So that's kind of the origin of this. And from what I can tell, again, I don't totally know yet, but I think there was some sort of evolution from something like this to, you would need to fiddle with this to get the exact utensil that you want, to more something along these lines. This is, an all-in-one. You got a fork and you got a knife all in the same thing. That you can use. And then you get some even wild and wackier ones like this. You got a fork on the end, a knife on the side. Obviously you get something like, I was just holding up in front of the camera as well. You get things that look like this. And as you can see on the handle, this one was made in Liverpool. So, they're being made all over the place. It's just kind of an interesting world that I couldn't find as much information as I expected to about, where these things came from, who started developing these. But as near as I can tell, they did become fairly common in the late 1860s, early 1870s, as the need for prosthetic limbs went up. There was an interest in some innovation to try and make life as easy as possible for Civil War veterans that might have only one arm. One of the things that gets brought up pretty frequently when it comes to this sort of stuff is the left-handed penmanship contests, a way to kind of highlight and celebrate soldiers that only, have lost the use of their right arm, which most people are right-handed. Not me, I'm left-handed, but you see these left-handed penmanship contests. Talked a little bit about that with Allison Johnson on a previous live stream that we did, so go check that out if you want to learn more about that. But it's all in that same vein of, American society trying to, and I'm not even sure what the right adjective is, grapple with, support, assist Civil War veterans who are missing a limb, prosthetic limbs, interesting, multi-purpose utensils like this. This is all part of the material culture, the physical legacy that gets left behind, from the Civil War. If there isn't this wave of amputations, it's entirely possible that, I'm not holding this object in my hand and something like this never gets made. You could argue it probably would have at some point, but that kind of accelerates the development of something like that. So again, the reverberations of the Civil War are long and lasting. So we hope you've enjoyed this, I guess what we'll call a Civil War medicine miscellany, just kind of bouncing around to some of Jake and I's favorite artifacts in the collection, some of which you can see if you come here to Frederick, some of which you cannot see. And this is the only way you get to see them, is through these digital programs. And if you enjoy these digital programs, when we show you exclusive, exciting behind the scenes stuff like this, we hope you consider liking these videos, following us, liking us on social media, subscribing to our YouTube channel and all that good stuff. It's all free, and all of that really does help us, I promise you. And if you want to go above and beyond that, consider either becoming a member or donating to our fundraising campaign. It's all tax deductible as you start thinking about your year-end giving. All of that really helps us. There's links in the comments. So we hope you've enjoyed this. I know this was a lot of fun for us. It's always fun for us to kind of get to dive into our collection a little bit. It's wide, it's varied, and hopefully we've been able to show you that Civil War medicine is a little bit more than just a bone saw. Any closing thoughts, Jake?
Just to say, yeah, if you want to support the museum, consider becoming a member or donating to our fundraising campaign. I want to give a shout out to Jada, who did become a member during the course of this program. So thank
All
you
right.
so much for joining us and becoming part of the museum and supporting the museum. Very excited about that.
Well, and
And
it's worth mentioning too that the membership money that we receive, among other things, it goes to help continue preserving the life of these artifacts that we've been talking about today.
absolutely, absolutely. Do have a quick question snuck in by
Oh, good.
Lynn, and it goes back to our knife fork combo there. Lynn asks, were such implements dispersed through veterans programs at cost differential relating to Civil War service?
Now that I just don't know. Like I said, I was trying to do some research on these Canorks knife fork combos. It's such a weird word. The knife fork combos. I was expecting there to be more stuff out there about them, but I could not find very much. And so it's entirely possible. I think more likely they would have maybe heard about it, or a friend or a loved one would have said, "Oh, I saw this and I thought of you. You might like it." Um, they might get their prosthetic limb through a program like that, but I don't think like utensils or something like that would fall under that purview. I'm prepared to be wrong about that, but that would be my guess.
And that's one of the things, Lynn and everyone tuning in, as we're doing these kind of research on these specific artifacts, we're going to be turning up more and more kind of, fascinating tidbits about these pieces. I know I came across some while doing research for this. So stay tuned for more of the videos, and subscribe to our social media and to our blog on our website, civilwarmed.org. You can get the latest, sign up for our mailing list. That's where you'll find all of this new information that we are working on, actively trying to learn more about what's in our collection and to tell these incredible stories. Do want to say our little followers button did get us 9 new followers. So if you followed us during the
Hey,
stream, thank you very much.
welcome
And
aboard.
yeah, welcome aboard, and thanks so much. I'll be back again on Friday, December 11th, for the 158th anniversary of the Battle of Fredericksburg. I'll be talking about the medical care administered during that battle, kind of the medical history of the Battle of Fredericksburg on Union and Confederate sides during the battle. I look forward to presenting to you all then, and hope to see you all again very soon. So I hope you have a great day, everybody.